started as people join us. As we're waiting for everybody to come on, I'll just go through some of our admin items. Welcome to AHA with Amplify. We're excited to have you here. Today, we've got our very own Jordan from Amplify Tech discussing the trends in technology and specifically cloud systems and ERP. So we're really excited. For the one time a year, we actually dominate the whole screen with amplifiers. So it's an exciting topic of tech today. Coming up next, as we wrap up the season in June, we're actually going to go with personal branding and communication. So a lot of you had really great feedback, and I appreciate the support and the comments about the personal branding article we had in CPA Dividends, as well as our blog on personal branding. And with that, we had the opportunity to have an actual expert step up and volunteer to do an AHA with Amplify for us. So our June session is communication and personal branding. We're really excited about that. We then take a break for July and August because we know that you'll want to be walking your dog or going out for patio lunches or maybe on vacation in July and August. So none of you would attend our webinars, and we respect that. So we'll take a break. And then in September and October, we already have some great lineups. We're going to be talking about data analytics and supply chain and a whole bunch more for our third season of AHA with Amplify. So make sure that if you're not a member, that you sign up so that you're the first to learn about what's coming up next. We're also going to do a transaction and M&A update live in October. So that'll be a live event. They always sell out, and the people that are members of AHA get first chances to attend those live in-person CPD events. So be sure to join. Nikki will share the posting, and you'll have an opportunity to register and become an AHA member. Lots happening around here. Speaking of what's happening with Amplify, I want to also do a shout out for our Lively Entrepreneur Talks. It's our new podcast video series where Jesse and I sit down, and as it turns out, we get super vulnerable, and I can't believe that we have published some of the things that we've said on those videos. It's a bit embarrassing. So join us in our vulnerability and embarrassment and listen to our topics. We've got cash flow, we've got talent, we've got navigating business, and a whole bunch more coming up soon. But 3 are already available, and they can be heard on video or on podcast. So join us with that latest and greatest venture that we're doing. So without further ado, let's get rolling with today's AHA with Amplify. So we've got Jordan. He's our own director of sales in the tech department. We're excited to be in our second year of Amplify Tech, and we have a great team and lots happening in that department. So for many of you that don't know, we are an Oracle NetSuite solutions provider. So we're up to date on what's happening with tech and specifically cloud systems and ERP. So Jordan is going to give us an update on what is happening in those worlds of cloud systems and ERP. And we're excited to have him here and teaching us today. Thanks, Jordan.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for passing the ball over in the introduction there. I'm just going to share my screen quickly and make sure that pops up. Is that working correctly?
Yeah, we're seeing everything we need to see. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Great. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Jamie. Thanks for the introduction. I was actually going to say some of the things that you mentioned. Fancy enough, with our AHAs with Amplify, typically we outsource the talent or the speakers for the events. So, we had some feedback to get some of our own people in here. So pretty excited today to chat a little bit more about Amplify Tech, Cloud ERP, and just quickly, even what we do at Amplify. So happy to be here, and ultimately kind of just to set the expectations. If you didn't have a chance to read the bio of the presentation at the end of this session, kind of a good takeaway would be to understand, really assessing your current operating systems, your technology, your processes at your business, and seeing, is there a way for us to maybe do this better? Might, just give you some information today and some tips on what to look for, to maybe mark some red flags that maybe it's time to actually consider a switch to a cloud-based ERP, or, even streamline some other systems and processes internally at your business. So that's really the goal. Having said that, The agenda for today, obviously there's going to be a lot of people on the call that know who Amplify is. The majority might not know who I am. So I'm going to do a quick story on what Amplify really is, what we do, who the heck am I, and a story that's kind of linked us all together, which is actually funny enough. I've known Amplify for well over 10 years. And yeah, so we've worked together on and off in many different scenarios. So a lot of connection and between all of us there. Once we go through that, that'll kind of set the stage. Honestly, that story will set the stage of what we're going to get into today. We'll start off by really getting educational about ERP. So really, what is an ERP? What isn't an ERP? What types of ERPs there are? How they differ from each other. And we'll also look at some marketplace trends of that as well. So really what I mean is we'll look at where ERP has come from, where it's at today, and where cloud ERPs are at today, and where they're going to go into the future. So that's always a fun topic. I really like talking about that. I have some opinions myself, some data, some cool things to share with you all. Thirdly, if that's a word, we're going to get into 6 signs it might be time to switch to a cloud ERP. So I kind of mentioned that before. We've, as business leaders and finance leaders at Amplify, we've identified some core things to look for to really determine if now is the right time to switch to a cloud ERP. And maybe it's not the right time to switch, and that's totally okay. So we'll have a discussion around that as well. And most importantly, we're going to chat about implementation and, what that process looks like. What that process looks like, how to identify, if, let's say, you're going to make a switch to a cloud ERP, what to look for in advance to ensure your implementation goes accordingly. Because, through my experience of working with Amplify, through going through a lot of CRM implementations only, it might be honestly the most critical piece of the success of a cloud ERP. There's a lot of good technology out there. There's a lot of good options, too many options, to be honest. So really what it boils down to is that implementation and how it's going to get put into your business, because ultimately these systems are, they're big and they're designed to, run your business. So it's very, very important that gets done properly. Finally, we'll wrap up with, if we're considering the switch, you're like, yep, we've been thinking about this, maybe it's time to do that. I'll give you a few tips and tricks on where to start. And if you're, even probing software solution providers or cloud ERP solution providers, what to look for and what to ask them to get started, so that, your sales process isn't just a sales process. It's also a scoping process for you to understand if that business is the right business and if that software solution is the right solution. So just some core things to look out for. Okay, so getting started, what is Amplify? So again, for those that don't know, essentially Amplify, we are finance leaders and growth consultants that help small and medium businesses scale by aligning your financial strategy to your business goals. So really what that means is, we place fractional CFOs and finance leaders into ideally growing businesses that have great aspirations. And we're kind of, with that CFO title, that executive leader on your team, we're like a sounding board. We're problem solvers. We're not just accountants. We're business leaders to help your business scale and grow. So that's one of the core pieces of what we do at Amplify. That's also the first service line where Amplify started. Secondly, we also have a recruiting service line. So specifically in finance and CPAs. So if your business is scaling fast and maybe, something unexpected happened, you lost your senior accountant or, your controller or things like that. We specialize in helping recruit CPA certified finance people for your team. So we have tie-ins into our own CPA networks. We have a great bench of those players to help your business scale. And then finally, the most recent service line, as Jamie said, I think we've completed year 2. We're going into year 3 of tech. We're NetSuite solution providers. So essentially we resell NetSuite and we implement NetSuite. Obviously, today's about cloud ERP systems. I just want to be clear. We're a little biased to NetSuite in some cases, but that is not at all what the presentation is about today. You might hear me mention NetSuite here and there, some some pieces of it, but it's really all about cloud ERP education more than anything. So that's the stage of what we do and how we operate. Now, for a quick story to tie into that, actually, before I get into the story, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm actually not a CPA. So I'm one of the few people on Amplify that is not a CPA. I think there's a few of us for sure, but definitely don't have that knowledge as a lot of you on the call have in terms of the financial literature and that sort of thing. So bear with me if I say something that you might be like, that doesn't seem right. You can feel free to call me out. It happens all the time. But having said that, I feel I've gotten pretty strong in that category for where I've come from. So looking forward to continuing on. I would classify myself, I'm known as more of an experienced sales and marketing leader that brings just general leadership and culture to the businesses I work with. Right here, I actually hate sales, and I really do. And I want to explain that a little bit. So sales for me, when I say hate sales, that's more about, just really pushing, hey, like you pick up the phone, somebody's calling you, buy today, buy now. They're not listening to you. They don't care about hearing your problems or solutions. So to me, that's when I say I hate sales, that's what I hate. I've been in sales for over half my life, so call it 17 years. But for me, it's all about finding the right solution to the person's problems, not forcing that solution in. It's about building relationships, collaboration, that sort of thing. That piece is what I love. It's that other stuff that gets a little tricky. So yeah. So jumping into tying that into the story, when I was, that was probably 6 or 7 years ago, I joined one of my friends' companies from back in high school. We were young guys, we were aspirational, we were a media business. We essentially helped universities advertise to high school students. And, I joined in there as a business development manager and quickly scaled my way up to become GM for a couple of years and eventually CEO and partner of the business. The time we really, we were all somewhere between the ages of 25 to 30. We became the 42nd fastest growing company in Canada in 2019, second fastest in Calgary, all with not a lot of experience or really knowing what to do in terms of systems, operations, and finance. So funny enough, prior to that, I was working with Jesse Ferguson, one of the co-founders at Graph Hockey. And, we were chatting about this through friendship. I don't know where it really started. And then actually him and Jamie came out to one of our culture events and they joined us on a bus. Jamie, I'm not sure if you remember that. We went out kind of on a pub crawl together. And, I'm not sure if we were asking for the financial leadership. We knew we needed it, but we also understood that you guys were like, you guys need the support. And boy, did we ever. So long story short, I'm not sure if we were the first or the second client of Amplify, but that's really what kickstarted that story is, we did not have the right technology, systems, processes, financials in place. So Amplify, we hired Jesse. Jesse came in as our fractional CFO and really helped us put things into place, and it sure helped. So one of those projects was actually a CRM. So that probably started that back in, I want to say 2016 or so, just back when CRM was all the rage. We were implementing HubSpot. So definitely a smaller implementation than an ERP, but boy, did we get sold on the potential solution in the demo. What we were looking for, we were a very, sales orientated business. We built relationships with a lot of universities. We were very, out there. So we needed a lot of, front end tracking. Went through some demos. I thought we did some good due diligence, and then we saw the solution and we're like, man, that looks perfect for us. This is going to solve all our problems. Fast forward, it did not solve our problems. And that really tied into that implementation process. We had no idea what we were doing. I believe we took on a young company that was starting with it as well. And it was just kind of chaos. We eventually got there a couple years later, but for that just to be our CRM project, it should have been even a few months, 3 to 6 months to get that wrapped up and done. So that really sparked my interest though into technology and to see what's capable and what's out there. So especially with ERP, it's more of just a longer, it's just a bigger CRM project, obviously different with operations, inventory, finances and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's that quick story. And then finally, I'm an active mentor of university students, one of the things I love to do, and I help Mount Royal with some growth programs from time to time. So we can continue on. All right, getting into the meat and potatoes of the actual presentation today, why we're here. Before we do that, please feel free to ask questions, get interactive with me. I love to be challenged. If you disagree with something, that's great. Raise your hand. Let's have a conversation about it. If you have notes or something you think is important to add to what we're talking about, please do. We want this to be a very educational, interactive session as best we can. This works best in person. Obviously, we're on Zoom today, so that's okay, and we'll work with what we got. So just don't be afraid to interrupt me at any time. Okay, so for those that are experienced in ERP and know what ERP is, might just have to bear with me for the next 5 minutes or so, as we're just kind of educate everybody in the room so we can get on the same page and move forward so that we're all aligned with what we're talking about for the rest of the presentation. So ultimately, I'm going to just start with what is an ERP and what are the options and just some background around it. So I'm going to start actually with what isn't an ERP. So when we're looking at this, a quick question for the group, and feel free to either raise your hand, put a yes in the chat, but who feels their operating system looks something like this of their current business? We'll wait a couple minutes here. I can tell you when we were back at the story that I mentioned of our business, we looked just like this. It was pretty chaotic, but we made it work somehow. And that's okay, because it's pretty standard. Any comments? Jamie, anything to ask or anything coming through there?
I think it's a fairly common occurrence that people have a bit of chaos with their systems. And it's interesting because there is the theory of best in breed versus best in class, which I'm sure we can get into a bit later.
Yeah.
So, sometimes by design, this can make sense, but let's be honest, most of the time it's like 3-year-olds with Legos and it just happens by accident.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So especially in the area of business that we focus on, small to medium, you just have people starting. What we found anyway, and businesses we work with, is you start to scale, you start to put leaders in different areas of the business, right? And they start to kind of build out that area of business. And it's like sales, we need a CRM. And the finance team's like, we need a new system, or they're on QuickBooks, or the marketing team is even like, you know what, we need a new automation tool to help with our sequencing. And then operations, let's say we need a new inventory program. Next thing you know, if you're not careful, you've got 5, 10, we've seen businesses with 10 plus 20 different softwares trying to run their entire organization, right? So you get these little silos without even realizing it's happening because you're scaling so fast and things are just happening. So it's kind of natural. It does happen, and that's okay. We work with a lot of businesses that work like this, and it still works. But there's always a better way to do things. So when you start to get your systems looking and feeling like this, it can really slow you down in terms of the right visibility to your data. Obviously, there's manual data and reporting and exporting to match, to get the proper reports and that sort of thing. So it puts weight on, especially on your finance and operations team, to get things done. I think we've all been there with exporting data and trying to upload it into certain programs. And I know I've spent days trying to do that sometimes in the past. So really, when it looks like this, you kind of get in this groove of thinking it's, this is just the way we do things, right? And if that's the case, that's kind of why we're here today. Is there's a better way to talk about it. Or there's a better way to put an operating system into your business. So switching the gears, so what is an ERP, right? So I'll flip the question again. Does anybody feel their business operating system looks perfectly clean like this? And regardless of the response, it's kind of like, I'll call it a trick question for lack of a better term, but I don't think we've ever seen a business operating system look just as clean as it. Sure, it looks pretty, but nothing is ever perfect at this day and age anyway. Maybe in the future, who knows? But your operating system, even on a cloud-based ERP, is never going to be perfect. There's always going to be something that happens. Now, having said that, can a cloud-based ERP really streamline your operations? 1000%. So to think about what it is, an ERP is a single data source to run your entire organization on kind of those core areas of your business. So what I mean by that, to give you an example, we talked about there being CRM. So let's say you're on HubSpot. Let's say for your financials, you're on QuickBooks. And let's say for marketing, you're on, ConvertKit, or you're using Fathom or some other reporting tool to get the right reporting. Maybe you're on, Shopify for e-commerce to run your inventory and distribution and things like that. Those are already 5 different softwares. If you were to use a cloud-based ERP, chances are you can streamline almost all of those items into the single system. So that's one application, if you think of it as an app, to run your business. So to put it into retrospective, think of it as an app, right? You can, and especially, that's cloud-based, would be logging into actually using it on the cloud. But an ERP itself is designed to essentially do the same thing. So you're really eliminating multiple applications and data points to run your organization. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to get real-time access to data. It's going to eliminate sometimes tens, dozens. We've even seen businesses eliminate hundreds of hours in terms of manual labor and data entry. And it's going to give your executive team the right data and visibility to run the entire organization to make strategic growth decisions in real time. So that is the whole concept of an ERP. Not only that, there's other features depending on the type of ERP you go with, right? There's some that specialize in finance. There's some that specialize in, construction. There's some that specialize in manufacturing or global growth, or even just growth in general. It really depends on what you're looking for. And we're going to get into those trends later on what an ERP is and can do for your business. But again, just to reiterate, it's a single data source that ties in kind of those core process areas of business: sales, marketing, finance, operations, all into one login or one data source for your business. So what types of ERPs are there? I kind of alluded to it. Ultimately, there's 3 in my mind, okay? There's on-premise ERP, which is kind of old and outdated. And we can see the trends of everybody trying to get off of those right now. There's cloud-based ERP, which is new and cool. And there's the hybrid ERP, which is kind of a hybrid option, essentially an on-premise ERP that has extensions to cloud-based services somewhere else, either in a different location, et cetera, et cetera. So on-premise ERP, for those that don't know, it was essentially that literal hot, heavy 1,000-degree physical room in your office that had a big computer in it that you probably walked by and you're like, what is that thing? How does it work? That was essentially an on-premise ERP. That was also, when we say ERP, if you're starting to cringe on that word, it's really because of this guy right here. These were obviously in time for their time. You know what I mean? When cloud-based ERP wasn't really on the rise, there wasn't a lot of different options. So you had to use an on-premise ERP for your growing business. And, the struggles we see today, or that I've talked to, even 2 or 3 clients or prospects, if you will, that have been on an on-premise ERP and they got stuck with a version lock. So what I mean by that is there's system upgrades that happen, once, twice, a few times a year. And oftentimes on an on-premise, you don't have to upgrade to that version. But if you don't, your system, you can stay the same, but then you're not on the newest software and you don't want to upgrade because it might break some of your processes and systems in that technology. So you get stuck, right, on this older version because you don't want to go up to the new version. Now, we've even seen competitors, I won't name names, kill certain versions of ERP. So people have come to us saying, you know what, my X company or the current system I'm on is actually being phased out. So we need to make a new switch. So that's basically worst case scenario, and why we're seeing these on-premise ERPs really trend down in the market. So everybody's kind of moving off of those. Now, when we insert the cloud-based ERPs, as I was chatting before, think of it as almost like an app on your like on your phone. It's a download, login, there's an app, everything runs in the cloud, there's seamless updates, it's been designed to run on the internet, they're flexible, there's scale, you can connect different apps. It's a much more agile version of an ERP. So when we're looking at the trends, I won't get into the details now, but we'll see what's happening. Cloud-based ERP is going like this, and on-premise is going like this. And the hybrid is just there as a mix, because some businesses obviously still need to stay on this because they're so large, and it's really quite the challenge to make that switch. So as a quick comparison, just some general items, we're going to really just look at on-premise versus cloud. When we're looking at licensing costs, cloud is much lower. When we're looking at software and maintenance costs, cloud is much lower, obviously, because it's not a physical, you're not buying hardware, it's not a physical system in your business. When we're thinking about subscription costs, are probably relatively similar, but cloud's still going to be on that lower side. And then IT overall capital costs and hardware storage, again, cloud is going to dominate in those cost savings, really, because it's in the cloud, right? The storage side is just, purchasing data up in the air, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term. And finally, one of the biggest things when we look at the comparison is the implementation timelines. So we can get cloud projects done in 4 to 8 months. That's typically the standard. Depending on the size of your business, the complexity, that sort of thing. But if we're doing a standard, even for us, just with a standard NetSuite implementation, nothing too complex, 4 to 8 months is kind of that window to get it done. Okay, so that's kind of our educational stop on ERP in general. Any questions or comments on ERPs, or does anybody feel like they want some more information on them?
Yeah, there's some questions about, the size of a business that would be on a true ERP. And so, Jordan, in terms of what we recommend and what we see, what are your thoughts on the size of a business that should be considering an ERP, or that would generally be in position to put an ERP in place?
For sure. Yeah. There's kind of two answers I want to say to that. The first one for us is, is growth happening, right? Like, is your business looking to grow and scale? Typically, we see cloud ERPs get implemented as businesses want to scale in revenue, because they need better processes and systems in place to be able to handle that. The second piece that we see in terms of revenue points, is kind of a good target. Anywhere between 1 to 10 million with those growth aspirations is kind of a great time to implement and put a cloud ERP in. And again, it's really for those reasons, as we talked about. It's much easier to get those systems and processes in place early and have technology help you control and manage them, as opposed to, going from 5 million to 20 or 30 and then trying to put this in place and get these systems and processes all over. It's going to take a lot more time. It's going to cost a lot more. It just kind of makes it a lot more chaotic if you wait further down the road, knowing you're going to grow as a business.
Definitely. And I think we obviously see small, medium businesses hesitate because they don't think they're complex enough or big enough yet. But it's really a decision that you make, as exactly to your point, it's a decision that you make thinking about the future you and the you that you intend to grow to, not necessarily about the you today. And you do save actual time and costs by making a decision that sets you up for where you plan to be in advance of actually getting there. Because once you are of a certain size or complexity, that you can rest assured that that implementation and those initial ERP costs are going to be extravagantly more than if you had put it in advance. And so the whole cash flow analysis of the decision for the many CPAs we have listening does work itself out when you take a 3 to 5 year view with the growth in mind. So I think it's not about how big you are today. It really is about how big you expect to be. And with that size growth aspirations comes obvious complexity.
Yeah, exactly. And another piece that's, I think you nailed it. Another piece on that is just also the change management process too, right? Once you have more people in there, it's harder to implement a new system that is going to change some of your processes potentially, right? So the more people you bring on and they get stuck doing something one way, the more pushback or the more challenges you're going to have to, help bring that into the culture of the business.
Absolutely. That is a really good point. And I think even here at Amplify, putting in NetSuite far earlier than a typical business would, because we were also becoming an Oracle NetSuite solutions provider at the same time. That's been one of the biggest benefits of putting it in as early as we did, is that, a great majority of the people at Amplify have only known NetSuite. And so we continuously improve the reporting and the functionalities and the modules that we're using. But those changes are always like welcome changes, because they're very clear improvements and they're small, tiny learnings, versus when you put the ERP in to begin with, no matter how good it is a real disruption. It's a real disruption. And so and with that disruption and that change is some negative change management components along with the benefits that you're getting. So I think that's a really good point, Jordan. The other question that's come in is, the costs of an ERP. How do they range from reasonable to very expensive? And so obviously this is a big investment for every client that we work with, in terms of all sense of resources. So they're going to have to dedicate time. They're going to have to put some culture components in when it comes to change management, which is a resource that's important to every client we have. And then obviously the actual pennies and dollars, it's a real investment for sure. So what are your thoughts on the cost side of the ERP?
Yeah, so the cost side for me, or when clients ask me this, is, it is going to vary, by the system you choose and the size of your business and really what you're trying to do. So to me, to give a high level ballpark cost I'm just not comfortable doing that on that side, but I can give some points on how it works, right? So, I mean, for example, you like NetSuite, for example, you can get in there for, if you're a smaller business in that 1 to 10 million range, your licensing cost might be anywhere from, $2,000 a month to 5,000, even upwards of that a month. That's a broad range, and that could be even lower. It could be higher. It just really depends. So the way that I look at that, when people ask me about costs, that alone might make you go, whoa, that's a big sticker shock. But ultimately, to your point, is the way to look at it is data entry, manual labor, time saving, and, even morale, happiness of your team. Right. So we've literally scoped out projects where people are saying our AP and our AR process takes us 12 days a week, 12 days a month. And there's multiple people working on that. So when you work out those numbers and those costs, that is significantly greater than what the cost of the whole ERP is going to be. And that's just one process, right? We're just working on that AP, AR. So that doesn't include helping streamline, then adding on and helping streamline your CRM or your sales processes or your financial reporting and that sort of thing, right? So when people ask me this, that's kind of the first place I look at, as I go, hey, tell me about this. Tell me about your AP and AR. Tell me about your financial reporting. Tell me about this. Like, how is that? Like, how much time is being taken? What are the resources that are being applied to get this done? Like, do you feel it's really clunky and slow? Because if that's the case, then it's more like doing an internal analysis of your time, labor on that will justify the spend of the licensing of the product. And then to your point though, Jamie, yeah, there is that is a big, when we talk about the implementation, and we'll get into that, the big piece is also understanding the time investment from your team to get that done properly. So there would be, there's never a perfect time to implement, but that's one thing to always consider is, do we have enough resources to get this done on our team? And that's something that you should be scoping out in your sales process as well. When you're talking to that potential cloud-based ERP provider, is, have them try and help you understand what is needed to get this done properly from your side as well.
Sorry, just a second. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Jordan. I mean, because we do have a lot of CPAs with us today, one thing to think about is as simple as how much time is being spent in Excel. And if you're using Excel on a reoccurring basis to do analysis or reporting or what have you, over and over again, that can be automated within an ERP. And from there, you can take it to the next step and spend that equivalent time on insights and analysis and leadership, et cetera. So, just taking a personal example, Jordan, obviously, I've been doing the quarterly reports for Amplify for almost 5 years. Every single quarter, I do the report. The data in those reports has largely been unchanged. Back in the day, it would take me, no short of 20 plus hours to create that report. And almost all the time I put into it was digging and creating and using Excel and figuring out our numbers, like where does our revenue come from? Where do our opportunities come from? What's our gross margin in the departments? It was a very time consuming engagement. And with that, I had, a fabulous CFO that gave me almost perfect financial information, but the operational data and the insights and the other ways of cutting and slicing it, we only did every quarter. And it was 20 plus hours of effort. And now I can do that same report. I just push a few buttons. All my reports are set up in NetSuite, and I'm able to write the quarterly report in 4 or 5 hours. And the vast majority of the 4 or 5 hours is thinking about actions, leaderships, insights, culture, how I want to communicate. When it used to take me 20, and almost all that time was just data, like literally figuring out the data, checking that the data was right, because I had no reason to believe it was. So it's a major difference. And that's just that's only a timely example because I published that report yesterday and I was doing it Thursday, Friday, right? And so you got to think about those things too when you're talking about costs. If you just look at dollar values without thinking about how much you're amplifying, not to be cheesy, and then how much you're replacing, it can be a lot of misinformation, right? Just the numbers themselves. So awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And we could chat about that forever. And but that's the best way to think about it. It's not the sticker shock, it's the time, the data, and the value that you're saving beyond, of doing slow and outdated manual processes. Okay, good little chat there. We're going to move forward to some marketplace trends of the ERP. So now that we've got some good education on what's happening, or sorry, good education on the types of ERPs, how they operate, what they're designed to do, let's chat about this is kind of the fun stuff for me. Oh, a little too far. So 52% of Fortune 500 firms since 2000 are gone and dead. So I'll just kind of sit there for a second and let that sink in a bit. So 52% of Fortune 500 firms since 2000 are gone. So that's pretty crazy stat when you think about that. That's only 23 years ago. And 52 of the biggest businesses are kaputs. So why? I don't, you know what? Where this goes with this is more of kind of what we talked about, like why. I don't really know. I can't sit here and tell you why they're gone, but I have a hunch that I bet they didn't have the right data, the right systems and processes in place to make strategic decisions. When we look at some of these names up here, even, they were slow, they were stubborn to move and be agile. So the reason why I like to bring this up is because this was also the time of slow and agile ERPs, the on-premise stuff we were talking about, right? So when you move slow, you don't have the right data, your team is, working all manual, that sort of thing. It can be scary, and you might struggle to make the right growth decisions in the future. So just something to be cognizant of. So looking at, cloud ERP and where we're at today versus on-premise. So we've already moseyed up to the 2023, but even looking at 2019, cloud ERP was pretty new on the scene and dominated by on-prem. But fast forward 5 years, and it's completely projected to double. And cloud and on-premise ERP is declining pretty significantly. Now, having said that, I would say the reason why this isn't decreased even more, going on a much steeper decline, is probably because it's very hard to switch off of some of those systems of these large organizations. And we're seeing cloud ERP rise because, again, it can be so agile and implemented into small and medium businesses very quickly. And we're starting to see that technology become really quite good. It's still not nowhere near I think it's going to be. I still think it's very much in the early stages of cloud ERP and the technology, but we can see that time and time again. I think it's going and trending in a very, very good place. So to this day, when we're looking at 2023, we're still suffering from way too many software choices. There's too many options out there. There's an app for this that specializes in this. There's an ERP for this that specializes in this. Maybe it does this. There's CRMs, there's financial tools that you can essentially find a technological solution for a department of your business, which when we, look back at the beginning of the conversation, makes it very easy for your system to be disjointed right out of the gate, because there's a something and there's a piece for everything. So what does that mean for kind of the future? So right now, this is where this has led my opinion to be. We're kind of still in that very infancy, early on stage, because nothing is really, I don't know if it'll ever be perfect, but nothing has really been figured out yet where cloud ERP is like, yeah, I get one. My implementation's done on time. It's on budget. It's incredible. Like, it has solved everything like it's supposed to. So we're still not at that age. Where we're at, for example, is we're seeing, major players in the tech space and ERP and CRM like HubSpots and Salesforces and things like that, is they have these ecosystems on their actual platform. So what I mean by that, so NetSuite, for example, it has suite apps. So obviously it has core functionality to run your whole business, but one instance is field service use. So we have some clients that specialize in field service workers that are out doing land surveying or whatever it is. They need their guys out in the field to do time entry daily, expenses, that sort of thing. They need to do all of these things in a more detailed basis. NetSuite may not support that right out of the gate, but it has a suite app that's built on the system, so it's native to it, that you just purchase and you add on and away you go. They have hundreds of these suite apps for all sorts of industries, all sorts of problems, or all sorts of industries or solutions that you need, different services. You can basically find a suite app for anything like that. HubSpot has the similar ecosystem, starting as a CRM. Back, I think it was 2010 or something like that. They started, I'm not sure the exact date, so don't quote me, but a while ago, started as a CRM and a marketing platform. They have an operations section, they have an operations, module now. They have a customer service module. They have an ecosystem to add things on. Same with Salesforce on the App Exchange. So all these guys, right? There's nothing really complete yet. Soligo is just a tool that acts as an intermediary. It's strictly a connector that helps connect NetSuite to another app that isn't a suite app. So let's say, you really like a certain software, but it's not on the NetSuite, you're a NetSuite user and it's not on the NetSuite ecosystem. You would essentially get Soligo. They probably already have a pre-built connection into that software, and it would make a connection to the two technologies to talk one another in a one-way or a two-way, however you would like to set it up. So what that tells me is that we haven't seen a true, cloud ERP system really figure out an industry or a an industry yet. So NetSuite, for example, is designed for businesses that are to scale because it's pre-built, right? So it specializes in, there's NetSuite manufacturing, there's NetSuite retail, NetSuite for professional services. And then at the other side, there's other cloud ERPs out there that also specialize in construction or even wholesale or very similar things to NetSuite, but they don't do the whole piece. So there's a ton of different options that specialize in a certain industry, but they don't really have it completely figured out yet. And that's why we need these suite apps and partners. So just my opinion, where I see this going, and the reason why I say this is really because the industry is expected to double here by the year 2026. Where I'm going with this is that I feel these cloud ERPs are going to get so good at what they do in each industry that the implementation time is going to get drastically lower, or like the time's going to be a lot quicker, and it's going to be a lot more specialized by industry and customizable, very easily customizable to operate the way your business does. So you're going to be, I'm a retail business with an e-commerce store. You're going to be, I know I need this ERP, this system, because they crush it. They dominate it. It's easy to set up. Here's my cost. Boom. That's, in my opinion, where I think the market's going. And there's there's some trends trending towards that. So so if I was to tell you this, the cloud ERP market is going to double back in 2010 or 2005, you'd think I'm taking crazy pills, because you're in your office, literally using your hardware, your on-premise ERP to heat your office when it's -30 outside. But that's kind of where we're at. So just to give you wanted to give you a heads up on where this landscape is going. This cloud ERP market is on the rise because the technology is kind of just getting started, and it's got some a very cool place to go in the coming years. All right. Anything to add on that, or anybody with different opinions or views on the technology landscape for cloud ERP?
Yeah, a couple things, Jordan. So with the tech available, as you mentioned, and how each ERP often does have to integrate into apps or systems that are separate. I mean, it's interesting because that comes back to that best in breed and best in class situation, right? And so we make that decision every day within Amplify, for example. And so obviously, as a solutions provider, we're biased and make decisions in a different lens than an average company, but we choose to use NetSuite for absolutely everything so that we can get to know it better and represent it better, etc. But certainly that doesn't mean that all aspects of NetSuite that we use we would recommend to every client, because there are cases where they're on really incredible software that they shouldn't necessarily replace or give up. And I think one of my favorite examples is obviously Salesforce. If you've invested in Salesforce and customized it, you certainly have some sunk costs that are pretty heavy. And the reality is more Salesforce customers are integrated with NetSuite than any other ERP, and especially if they use Calico, it's almost a perfect marriage. It's an expensive marriage at times, but it is really taking the best of the breeds and integrating with near perfection. And then, of course, if you want a marriage that needs a bit more counseling, there's some integration options that are not quite as perfect, but maybe are more cost effective for you with a little bit more attention. So what are you seeing in regards to that, and how do you help people make those decisions? Because those are big decisions, right? To keep multiple systems and invest in that integration, or to just go full enterprise with an ERP and use all the aspects of whatever ERP they've decided to invest in.
Great question. I think that it's a really good question, and there's a couple ways to answer it. So let me see what the best way here is. I would say it boils down to, going back to what we were talking about earlier, Jamie, is the growth and the goals and the requirements of the business on what's needed. And then also kind of scoping, what is needed now versus in the future. Because what we've seen with these implementations and time again is Where they go wrong is when everybody's like, okay, we're gonna bring in, NetSuite, for example, and we're gonna integrate it into our custom software right off the bat with our financials, with our, whatever other systems that they're using. That's kind of where we see things go wrong, because it's just trying to do too much too fast. It's more so like, get this system in for like the core reason why you need an ERP. And oftentimes that's just financials out of the gate. And then once you start to understand that that system can now integrate easily into other tools or other applications you're using in your business, then start to add that on as you go. So that's kind of how we approach those scenarios. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think you raised two really important points. There's this trendy idea of transformation, and obviously Jesse and I come from big four firms where transformation was all the rage. But the reality of what we have seen is that, exactly to your point, a step-by-step and continuous improvement approach really does get you further faster than taking a whole transformation approach. And that's true for actually some of the biggest companies in town, as well as the small, medium, and growth businesses that we focus on. Is actually agnostic to the size of the business. The concept of transformation and being transformational is great. It's a great sales pitch. It makes for really good marketing, but it's not how the world works. It's not necessarily how humans work. And humans are at the core of every implementation. So I think you raise a good point. Step by step and a path to success is much more proven and it's more cost effective, and it's easier on your culture and your resources too. So I think that's a critical point that you made. Another important point that you alluded to is, when we used to do system selections, which obviously we're agnostic anymore, so we no longer sell those, but happy to refer you, any of the members listening, to people that can do great system selections. But we used to do a lot of system selections, both at Amplify as well as in our old days as consultants. And one thing that we always pointed out was, what is the strategic North Star or magic juice of your business? And, if you think about, Jordan, you were telling the story about Glacier, and Glacier's magic was in their sales. So in that case, you're going to want the best CRM that's going to match that juice that is driving the strategy of your business. And so that might mean that your CRM is separate and best of breed than the rest of your ERP. Similarly, if you're a warehouse company and what you do well is moving product quickly in an organized fashion, cheaper than your competition, then you might want a warehouse system that's separate and specialized and not within a classic ERP. So I think it really comes down to, what's your magic juice? What's your strategy? What differentiates you? What's your North Star? Whatever it is you call it in your business, that you should invest in the best in breed and the best software out there. And that might be a fully independent system, as you mentioned, like a custom system that they built over time. But those things that aren't of that level of critical importance, try and use it within the ERP and avoid the cost and confusion of integration. I think that is a great way to start that conversation. We've got some questions about cyber threats, Jordan. Are your cyber threats less when you use a cloud-based ERP?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I haven't had a cyber question in a while. To be honest, I don't know. Versus it on premise, are the cyber threats less? I mean, I do know the cybersecurity standards that NetSuite has in particular are incredibly strong, and I don't think they've ever had a security breach. So I do know they're very strong in that place. Just on NetSuite, I can't speak for the other systems. I would imagine that it is stronger, but again, that's just an opinion. But I'd be happy to get some data and send that to whoever asked that question at the end of the call for sure. Unless Jamie, you have any thoughts yourself?
I can put a little bit. So the answer is yes. Cloud-based ERPs are generally more secure than on premise, because right away you actually eliminate some of those physical threats, right? And so we don't talk about them as much anymore in a post-COVID world, but the reality is that pre-COVID, the two most common ways that you were going to have a cyber issue was someone literally sneaking into your office and physically doing something, which is an irrelevant concept when you're in the cloud, right? And that was a prominent way that people were getting into systems. It's obviously decreased drastically with the fact that we're in a post-COVID world and just more of a remote world. But that used to be a very, very common way that cyber threats happen, and it still is much more common than people realize. And then second of all, the most common cyber threats you're going to face as a company is human error, where they're giving their passwords out or logging in incorrectly, etc. And most cloud ERPs are going to have pretty standard securities that are going to help with that. But at the end of the day, if a human makes a mistake, doesn't matter if it's cloud or on premise. And that is by far your biggest threat as an organization, is that your people literally make an error and that gets somebody into your system. So overall, the answer would be yes, but it doesn't necessarily directly impact that human error, which is your most likely threat you're going to have. Another question that came up was NetSuite for insurance. Jordan, I know a little bit about this, but I'll throw the ball at you first. This is the problem with having an amplifier as a guest. I'm answering questions. I got to shut up here. No one can hear from me.
No, that's okay. I mean, NetSuite for insurance, for sure. I mean, depending on the requirements, NetSuite can be a system for an insurance business as well. We've scoped out a very large insurance company in the past. I believe that is still potentially going on, but it depends on the requirements, but definitely NetSuite could be a fit out of the gate if we're just looking at NetSuite for insurance.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And I think that depending on what type of insurance company is being spoken of, certainly if it's a professional services firm and the nature is more aligned with professional services, NetSuite is absolutely a top choice for professional services, and we can speak to that being one of those firms. So so that for sure would be well served. And then if they're insurance at a more compliance or what have you nature, then it would depend on the details, but by and large, highly likely to be effective for sure. Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. That's all for questions for the second.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so 6 signs. Now that we've kind of got some more education, let's just jump into it here on 6 signs it might actually be time to switch to a cloud-based ERP. So we've kind of touched kind of on all of these, but we're going to kind of summarize them so it's very easy and clear for everyone. So number 1, your business is growing quickly. So typically, the first thing that should be asked, depending on who the cloud ERP provider is, but are you guys is your business looking to scale, right? If your business isn't looking to scale and you're just kind of looking to stay status quo, really, you just need to ask yourself, is it worth putting in a new system with everything that we talked about, or can you kind of operate with what you're doing? So, but if your business is growing quickly and you have really, higher revenue targets and aspirations, definitely worth putting that system in earlier. Again, to all the things we talked about, change management, updating your systems and processes right away. So when people come on, they're not going through 2 different systems, that sort of thing. And I know we did this in the past, we made growth decisions. We were growing so fast. It's like, well, what's our profitability on this? Or, are these campaigns over here making us money? We didn't really know. And we're just like, well, we should do it. So obviously, it worked out, but I bet it could have worked out even better if we had the right data to make some of those decisions as we grew fast. So that's number 1, is if you're in growth mode and you're using multiple systems, definitely I would say start to look into cloud-based ERPs. And a good place to start is just that specialize in your business. Number 2, lack of automations for manual tasks. So again, chatted about this. How many hours are you wasting doing data uploads, entry, matching, invoice matching, all that sort of thing? Are your sales orders Is your sales team is there any controls on what your sales team is actually putting forth to clients? Is there controls and authority for those things? Because I know oftentimes people are putting out proposals you can see happen, and the costs aren't right. They don't match actually what's going on operationally or internally in the business. And things like that. You can put those controls in place to control that. So you're obviously going to be more profitable and have better flow of your entire call it lead to cash process as one of the examples. But again, that's only one area of the business that can apply to AP and AR, and all that can be done under one cloud ERP instance. So number 3, sales lost and or profitability is slipping. So kind of a combination of those things, right? If you're exporting a lot of data, there's human error that can happen. So when you're looking at, let's say, your revenue is going like this, but your profitability is slipping a bit, you don't really know why, right? Perhaps your vendors or have increased the price of their goods, your vendors increase the price of their goods, or your stock or inventory levels are down. You don't really know what's going on, or those prices have increased, or your quantities are down. You don't really know because you don't have those controls and data to see what's really happening behind the scenes. So another thing, again, with that ERP is that's all that is under one data source. So once you hit sale or you sell something, that instantly impacts your inventory, your stock, your profitability, your P&L, all those things all at once. So something to consider if that's bugging you as a business leader in your organization. Number 4 is your customer data is not segmented. This can be done obviously with just the CRM itself, but if you really want to get into it financially, let's say you want to run profitability on even your account managers or your account execs that are in a very highly sales oriented business, or maybe you want to look at it by region. Maybe you want to look at it by whatever the case is. There's options for you to really segment that data to make better growth decisions on, who's performing better, what is performing better, that sort of thing. 5, this one is also pretty big and important, as I know some of the software is like, the startup software is called QuickBooks, that sort of thing, really do struggle when it comes to expanding into a new country or a new market, or you have new service lines or things like that. Really, that comes down to even foreign exchange and things like this. The entry-level services do struggle there, and cloud ERP is really strong in this area. So that's even, subsidiary management, consolidation of your books, all that sort of stuff. That's one area that a cloud ERP should really, I know NetSuite does specifically, it's very strong, is giving you the ability to get the better alignment and visibility into all areas of your business if you're planning to move into another market. Last but not least, your management and executives and boards need better info to lead and grow your business. Not sure if you've ever walked into, a board meeting, like, I don't know if this is right, but I'm going to try and present it anyway. I've actually done that in the past, so it was a long time ago, but we didn't really have anything else. So, would we have benefited if that was the case? 100%. So having that right data and having that system that you can rely on, and having that data on the system eliminates a lot of human error as well. So once you have those automations and workflows set up and worked through, humans aren't really touching it to configure the data besides just the inputs where you can tell if that's, true or not. So this really will help you get better data for your board, your executive team, whoever else needs it to make those growth decisions. Okay. Any questions, comments on that from anybody, Jamie?
No, not at this time. You can keep rolling.
Awesome. Okay. So finally, now that we've got through the core there, we're going to chat about the implementation piece. Is implementation more valuable than the software? I mean, it really does depend, but from my understanding, if it was my opinion, I would say yes. To be honest, you can probably pick narrow down to 2 or 3 different cloud ERPs one might be the best solution, but chances are 2 or 3 are still going to work for you. They might not work as well. So to me, what that tells me is your implementation team is just as important as the software that you choose. So it's very crucial that when you're going through that, you're vetting that team on how they do their implementations. Have they done implementations for this, that sort of thing. So these numbers up here are not really supposed to scare you. Maybe they do, but it's just realistic, right? And a lot of these are skewed from on-premise ERPs back in the day, which who knows, let's call that 2015 for today. But 50% of them get done on time. 50% of ERP implementations fail the first time around, and 65% go over budget because the system was not really sold to them properly. So definitely something to consider when you're talking to those, when you're considering a cloud-based ERP. And some of those things you need to consider is just even a standard process, right? For us, this is how we approach our system implementations. It really starts with the plan. And this planning actually should take place in the sales process. Ultimately, your implementation team should be tied into, or at least have an understanding of what's going on before the system is even sold, so that they know what's going to have to happen for that implementation of the software. So really, really crucial. This might be one of the most important pieces for sure. And again, it happens in that sales process. It starts to happen there. Sorry, it doesn't happen there. It starts to happen there with needs assessment. I'm going to get into that in just a second. Second is, how that kind of bleeds into, all right, that's when the selling team goes to work most of the time. Configuration is where the person you bought the software from is doing a lot of that work. Testing and training, that's, your team's on deck. A lot of that is heavily involvement and you guys using the system, ensuring it's working properly, and everything that was configured is done according to the plan. Finally, that's go live. That's the date that you actually cut over from your system and move to your new cloud-based ERP system. And one thing we do want to, I actually added this in here recently. I know it's not a part of the implementation process, but what we're seeing is support, right? So even with a good CRM, if as you're scaling and growing, things are going to change after you go live. So especially with an ERP. So does your implementation team, how does their support work? Do they actually go into your system and fix it for you? Can they do that? Oftentimes using support from direct sellers of cloud ERP is really just, here's a FAQ, go figure it out, right? So really try to identify the support that your business can handle and your business needs once that implementation is complete. All right. Any questions on the implementation piece, Jamie, from anybody there? Or do we want to, I got about 5 minutes left and then we can get the Q&A, maybe even less.
Okay, we can wait till then. That's fine.
Okay, awesome. So where to start? So, based on today, maybe you're starting to think, all right, we do, maybe you looked at all those 6 signs, you're like, we have all 6. If you check off boxes for all 6 signs, it might be time to start considering an ERP. Or a cloud-based ERP. But if you check off a few, maybe start to do some research and look for, just start to, poke around. And if that's the case, here's kind of where, the research has shown things are very, where information is valuable to making these types of decisions of switching over to a cloud-based ERP. So reports, inquiries, rankings. So the vendors offering these solutions, to me, this is probably, one of the most important, and also the references. So when you're reaching out to, let's say you're looking at NetSuite or you're looking at Microsoft, when you're reaching out to them and go through that actual first couple meetings with the business, right? Talk to people in your network. You can try before you buy. Oftentimes, I actually don't recommend this. The only reason I don't recommend this is because these systems have a lot of power, right? So if you get the keys to, let's say let's say you don't even have a driver's license, and the first car you get is, hey, here's the keys to a Ferrari, and you get behind the wheel and try and drive it. It's going to be a little scary. And it's going to have a lot of horsepower, and there might be some challenges, and maybe you're going to crash into a wall. But or maybe for lack of a better term there, or a better saying. But so that's kind of the only one there that I would disagree with. But yeah, ultimately talk to the suppliers, set up meetings, and talk to the vendors, set up meetings, and go through the start of the process to really understand kind of these items here, right? So the first steps of action would be just getting a right fit meeting. That's setting up a meeting with somebody on their team, and you're just having a high level chat about, what does your system really specialize in? Here's our requirements. You're also should be probing for how they do the implementations, what their processes are, really, and they should be able to give you a good understanding of if their system is right for you. So they should also be vetting you. So another thing to look out for is if you're just vetting them on the right cloud-based solution for your business, and they're just saying, yeah, this is perfect, we haven't seen any challenges, I would be weary of that, and just kind of look to probe more. They might just be trying to sell you more so as that company should also be vetting you as well to make sure that it's a right fit for both sides. Again, because once you get into that implementation, you guys are going to be working very closely together. Second, you can go to a needs assessment, which is even going deeper. And, they should be bringing in a solutions consultant, somebody that specializes in what you've talked about here in that first meeting, to really help you even better understand how the solution or how the system could help solve your challenges and problems. And finally, you can get all the way to a full demo of that without having to make a decision. Obviously, there's time investment, but there should be no cost investment. Sometimes there could be costs. Very rarely do we see that. But ultimately, you can get all the way through this to understand if that system is right for you by just investing a few hours of time to get all this done. And with that, that's a wrap. So that's all we've got today. If at any time you're not sure on where to start, or you have questions or comments, I'm available. Jamie's available. Our team's available. Phone call, email, anything, anytime. We're here to support our Western Canadian businesses and Canadian community to help everybody grow that could use a potential cloud-based ERP.
Awesome. So we had a question about, what are some of the warning signs that you have the wrong implementation partner, that you're talking to the wrong implementation partner?
Depends on your team. I would say one of them is if they're using an offshore or a different implementation team than the actual sales team would be one. So oftentimes we see, let's say if you're going direct to you're buying through, let's say NetSuite Direct, which would be buying through the website. You're going to be dealing with purely salespeople until you sign the deal. And once that gets signed, they're going to ship you over to an implementation team that is somewhere else around the world. And what we see in the past is they typically specialize in IT, and they're not business leaders, and they're not process people. So you kind of just are already behind the 8 ball because you've done all this work up front on the sales process, and they hand it to a team that has not been involved at all. And so you kind of have to restart. That would be the number one thing to look out for. Number two would be, making sure that whoever the project manager is for your implementation has business experience and has kind of senior level business experience. What I mean by that is, another reason why these implementations fail is if the implementing company does not understand your business or how your processes and systems actually work, they're going to have a very, very hard time getting that set up in the actual system itself, the ERP, because they don't really know even how the business works, right? So how are you going to, if you don't know how the processes and systems work, and they're not taking the time to understand your business, how can you possibly set it up in the technology, right? So they're just going to use basic processes in that tech that are not going to align with how you want it. and therefore you're going to have some challenges. So those would be my 1 and 2 items to look out for.
Yeah, I think that those are great points. You know, one of my friends used to always say that if you're looking at an implementation of an ERP as a business project, you're going to have far more success, right? And so the question kind of is, your team that you have on board, are they able to fill the gaps and make sure that it is led as a business project? And if you have that type of team, then you could be successful with you know, a group in the Philippines that are operating under Oracle, right? But for a lot of small, medium businesses, they don't have a business leadership approach to implementations, because a lot of times they're putting people on and it's their first or their second project, right? And so they don't fill those gaps. So they're leaning on the implementation partner to show up with business leadership, as you mentioned, and to be asking the right questions and having an interest and an understanding of the business so that you can partner together. And so it really depends a little bit on who your team is and who you're bringing to the table, because you need a lot less and you can have a lot lower expectations if you're wholesome with who you bring to the table. But most of the clients that we work with, the implementation is not their day job. It's the side of their desk added responsibility, and they're lean when it comes to time and resources. And so as such, they really do need that implementation partner to show up with a business leader approach, not an IT approach. So I think that's really critical, is to know what you need. And I mean, I always laugh because when I was in the industry and did a few implementations, my freak out moment would be, why am I the only one asking questions? Because I'm definitely not the smartest gal in the room, but yet I'm the only one asking questions. And that always made me nervous when the implementation partners weren't asking me enough questions or challenging me on my instructions or my information, because it's like, there's no way that I'm not getting something wrong here. And if you're not challenging me, then I fear that you're just checking off the box and treating this like a technology project. And it's far more important to me as the customer. So I think those are some things to think about for sure. And it's, you know, to your point, Jordan, with all those stats, you know, at the end of the day, most of those stats come from having the wrong team and the wrong partnership. It has really little to do with which software you pick.
Yeah, and that's just where I think, to that point, everybody vets the software really hard, and then sometimes it's like, oh, and you guys have an implementation team? Yep, great. You know, it's more like going through that process. Who is it? How does it work? And aligning it with your team, right? And if they even, you know, have additional resources to support it for you, sometimes that's an option as well. So really understanding your duties as the buyer of the implementation team and understanding the duties of the seller of the implementation team as well.
Yeah, totally. And the irony is that sometimes we kick the can down the road because we're not sure we have the resources, or we want to dive into this experience of such a big, hard, disruptive thing like an ERP. But to the point you made earlier, Jordan, if you are a growing business, you kick that can down the road and you've just made it more complex, more costly, and harder on your business. So that's the irony of procrastinating these big decisions, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
So, you know, what are you seeing in regards to some of the customers that you're talking to as they're like trying to figure out this whole new tech world? Obviously, I know you're obsessed with AI. A little bit, right, Jordan?
A little bit.
Yeah. You know, how does that impact the ERP and cloud world, or does it? Like, what is your predictions? And let's just asterisk this with, this is not Amplify's point of view. This is Jordan and his personal AI session point of view. But honestly, like, I know you're really into it. So how do you see AI coming into this space of cloud systems and ERPs?
Oh, that's a really good question. I could see it, you know, like, let's just take a standard, you know, distribution and inventory business, for example. I could see an AI, like an AI app, or whatever they're calling it, be bolted on into your ERP, and it's starting to learn the cycles of when you order, how you order, and when it needs to ship. So essentially I could see it starting to be you. Like if you're, and this is, again, it's not designed to, I don't think it's going to ever be designed. Maybe it gets there one day to replace you. It's designed to support you and make your job easier if you get ahead of how to use AI. So essentially that would just kind of sit on your ERP and go, you know what? We ordered 3 times a month at 100 units a month, and we're down here and our inventory gets, shipped at this time. It would learn all of that, and it would probably automate that entire process for you. And it would just be like, we're down here, we need to order now, order. Like, or you could probably even just have it do it for you, to that extent. And it's not going to make a mistake. So once it gets past that, alpha beta stages, that's kind of a piece where I could see it playing in the cloud ERP space. Same even in the on the financial and reporting. If you have a process that's dialed in and you're kind of running it, still doing manual labor and data and running it, but it's pretty concrete and secure, I could see it just getting plugged in, learning it itself, and you just going, hey, I want this, boom, and here you go. So that's kind of, those would be how I could see that jumping into that world for sure.
Yeah, I think those are really reasonable expectations. I think another one that we're hearing about, actually, we have a client that's doing some stellar work in this area, is that idea of like asking a question in layman terms and then getting the answer back, which is obviously data that comes from your ERP system. But it's just a simple either verbal or written question that's layman terms, and then essentially you get the equivalent of a report. But instead of sitting there compiling or coding or what have you, a report, you're able to just speak or type and then get an answer back. And that, imagine how incredible that could be for all of us.
That's a really good point, Jamie. So I do that all the time on like just writing in general and some, thoughts or whatever I have. I ask the AI, I'm like, hey, be a CEO of this type of company and like, give me your thoughts on this, or what would you do with that? So to go even further, Jamie, from your point, it's like, if you had all the data clean, here's our P&L, or here's our budget for 2022. We're this type of industry, we do this type of revenue, we have this many people. Please identify some gaps that I might have missed, right? And it will do that for you, right? Or please, am I out to lunch on this? Like, is my budget, kind of on par with industry average for this side or this and that? So if you have the data that you believe is right, you can, instead of going into that executive meeting, asking those questions in that meeting or having to go to your executive, you could have AI play that role and you could ask it those questions in advance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think another way that we're seeing it be used is even just that frequently asked questions. So when you used to have to hunt in YouTube or hunt in the NetSuite help desk or what have you, how do I create this report, or how do I find this information? Now, some of these AIs can give it to you in a much easier route, right? And frankly, they can even give you the coding to literally code or compile or what have you, a report. So it's pretty exciting what could be coming. Obviously, we would just remind people that, make sure you understand the security features of any AI technology you're using, and don't put confidential information in an AI system if you're uncertain about where it could go and how it could be used. Just want to make sure that we point that out. There's a ton of systems out there, and so they all have different security. So, be cautious if you're putting financial information in, especially. But well, that's exciting. We did have one more question in terms of trends. What are your thoughts on blockchain technology and how it integrates or pairs with cloud-based ERPs? Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would say, let me think about that for a second. I'm not, the blockchain, I know it a little bit. I'm definitely not as immersed in the blockchain, but, if it's just my opinion, where I could see that going, as I could see them going back to that inventory wholesale, example I used earlier, I could see that cloud ERP tying in the blockchain of that industry, right? And getting reporting and that sort of thing of where everything came from, or where it's going, or anything that happened to that item that you sold directly into your cloud ERP. I could see that happening if that's on par. But yeah, that's an interesting thought. I haven't actually thought about blockchain and cloud ERP working together, but I can see that being a very real thing for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, with most of the cloud ERPs that we see, it is an open API, so there's the opportunity to do custom integrations. And so, to the point you alluded to earlier, Jordan, we in fact do some of the integrations with NetSuite, for example, and clients' own systems that they've basically created in-house. And so similarly, whether the blockchain is a known established technology or it's an in-house creation, there's absolutely the opportunity to integrate it into most, if not all, cloud ERPs.
For
And
sure.
so you can certainly expect to do that so that the data is flowing seamlessly into the ERP.
Yeah.
Whether or not there be blockchain right within the ERP, I haven't heard of most of our competitors or NetSuite bringing that into house yet. We're hearing more probably about their ideas with AI, but
Yeah,
certainly
I
it
agree.
could be on the agenda. We just haven't paid attention.
Or if the question came from somebody with the idea, go explore it. Maybe that sounds like a good idea, to be honest. So, because you can put your vendors in, your shipping companies, all that, and I would imagine that all be connected one day. So that's kind of a cool concept. I haven't thought of that. So, good question.
Awesome. So I think we're at a wrap. We're 4 minutes to 1:30. I appreciate everything, Jordan. That was awesome. A good update for all of us. I want to remind everybody, join AHA with Amplify. It's at the top of the chat. Nikki shared that information. As a member, you're the first to find out what's coming next, and you're the first to get an opportunity to come to in-person live events. As I noted earlier, our next event is in June, and we're doing personal branding and communication. I think it's a really great opportunity for all of us at that finance leader or business leader level to think about how people are perceiving us and how we can have control over that and open doors and get more out of our career, whether it's within the organization that we work or whether it's a recruiting opportunity because we're looking for the next chance in our career. So really recommend that you look at the communication and personal branding AHA, which is our season ender in June. We'll take July and August off, and in the new year, which starts in September, we've got lots of exciting things planned for you. You've got data analytics, we've got supply chain, and then we have a live in-person M&A and transaction update event. So those are the three that we've already got set, but there's more to come when we get back in the fall. Really thankful that we have the opportunity to work with you on the third Tuesday of each month and to share information, and I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.